this one's working. I think this one still doesn't work. Oh, oh, never mind.
Do you want to kick this off, or how do you want this?
Um,
How's this working?
My job was to kick it
Yeah.
off, but if you're comfortable kicking it off, that's fine. Like, I don't have any critical info.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, we're just gonna do the. You have all the speakers and everything. Do you have all that, or you're just kicking it off? I can do the kickoff.
I'm about to say, I think you can do the kickoff. Y'all can do the transition. I mean, if you need me to help with the
Yeah, I'll call
presentation, I
you.
can. But
Yeah.
like otherwise,
Call you if you get stuck electronically.
yeah, pretty much.
All right.
But yeah, let them know about the PDH QR code.
Okay. Once you say that, then you just turn it over to me. Just tell me what you need to tell me as far as
Gotcha. So
Good stuff.
once we get to one, I'll be like, hey, it's 1 o'clock. We're getting started. Yada yada yada. The PDH thing, and then hand it off to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Ready? Break. All right. Hello? 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 Can anybody hear me? Just a little bit. All right, gotcha. Alrighty, everybody. It's about 1 o'clock, so I think we're going to get started. We're in room 8 for moving traffic and water in work zones. We've got the QR code for the PDHs up here, and we'll present it up here on the projector when the presentation is over. And yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Matt Lawfer now.
All right, thanks everybody. We got a good crew here today. So we've got construction. We've got Brian Skeens and Troy Brooks from construction. We got Randy Weiss from ICE, and then we've got hydraulics will be me, and then we got Justin Beaver from Work Zone Traffic Control, and then Michael Lindgren from Roadway. So we're just going to go through some presentations, talk about working in the work zone and traffic and water and how that moves through that area, and then what can we do to make it better or make sure we're doing a good job on our design so that transition from design through construction and final completion works well. So looking forward to this session, and I'll kick it off to construction here. Troy.
Thanks, Matt. I'll get her fired up here. My name is Troy Brooks. I'm the state construction engineer for NCDOT. I've got with me today Brian Skeens, and you're going to hear from him in just a second. He's the assistant state construction engineer for the western region of the state. And I guess first off, wanted to just thank the technical services group for inviting the construction guys up here to just give you a shout and give you a perspective on what we're seeing as far as moving traffic and water in the work zone. It's a huge challenge that we face, and we're going to get into some of those details, but we certainly appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak in front of y'all today. I would say we're probably your biggest critics of your plans as we administer these contracts, and our contractors probably equally as large of a critic of your plans. So we certainly appreciate the opportunity to engage and want to make sure that everybody's aware that the construction folks want to be engaged, whether that's an active project, whether that's a project that's in development. You're developing plans, you're getting those final field inspections done. We certainly want to be a part of that and look to improve on that for a number of reasons and a number of challenges that we're going to talk to you about today. So just to kind of kick off that thought process and that perspective, where are we now? And I think I've been doing highway construction now for 15 years, and utilities and managing water and traffic has always been, these are the challenges. These are the top critical pieces of what we do. And so we've gotten a lot better at that. I will say that we've seen trends probably over the past 5 years in the direction of just a larger number, and we've got the data to back this up. Supplemental agreements and claims pertaining to plan revisions, all revolving around drainage, not getting picked up in various phases of construction, leading to field modifications of those plans. And they've certainly driven up cost on our projects. And so that's a huge reason why I'm excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about that. We've certainly been in a situation the past 5 years where we're trying to be a little bit more fiscally responsible as we administer our projects, and certainly have to answer to those that fund the projects, and that being the taxpayers and the federal highways. So we just want to be mindful of that and make you aware that we're having to execute more change orders and that we're having to do with this. Ultimately, in a time where we are now, projects are more expensive than they ever have been in the past. So any day that gets delayed on a project, a critical path operation that gets impacted, an inefficiency that is felt by a contractor that's due to something they didn't bid their project to account for is extremely expensive. Escalation has hit the construction industry extremely hard, and so, when you start making changes after the fact, it's very costly. And so we recognize that there's going to be things that can't be accounted for, but we want to really hone in and ask for some support to maybe minimize some of these and pull back the reins, and hopefully we can share with you some of the things that we're seeing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and he's going to talk a little bit about what we're tasked with, managing risks, our folks in the field, as well as the contractors and their project teams as they think about managing risk. And we're active, we've got a contract and we've got a set of plans, and we're getting to work.
Yeah, so obviously, as a department, our number one priority is safety. And safety of the traveling public in these work zones and dealing with the water, just in a normal rainfall, not anything like we've experienced last week, but just normal rainfall. I think about projects like I-26 in Buncombe and Henderson counties. It's very narrow through there. There's portable concrete barrier in the middle, slopes up on both sides, and just not a lot of room. And when it rains, it can get kind of hairy through there, multiple backups and multiple accidents. So just think of those things as we're looking at, temporary traffic shifts and wedging. You think about wedging and the different stages of wedging that have to take place. It doesn't always get accounted for. Like, where's that water going to go once you build up on one side or the other? We think about our contracting folks out there trying to do the work and trying to avoid, getting caught up in an accident. We've had several fatalities recently, not necessarily due to water situations or drainage in general, but just contractor fatalities and our inspection staff that are out there trying to make sure these projects get built. So again, just, the safety is just needs to be number one. But then, things that we run into that we have to try to manage on these projects, cost is the big one. These projects are certainly not getting any cheaper. They're more and more expensive now than they've ever been. And, then when you tack on having to make adjustments and make changes in the field, that just leads to escalations. They're wanting more money. Materials are going up. And then, the projects are just having to be built less efficient than what they originally planned. Just one example that comes to mind when we think about drainage is, we'll show an open cut for a pipe installation. Well, you take into account sometimes that, especially in the western part of the state, those open cuts can be really deep and really wide. And that takes a lot of time to fill that back in. So we may have to go in and do supplemental agreement to change that to bore and jack. Well, that gets very expensive when you start making those changes. It slows down, production, just getting the materials, and then that adds time to the project. And it changes kind of the way the contractor bid it. So it's just some of those things to take into account. We don't have as much experience out in the field as we once did. When I started, we had resident engineers that would get out there, lay down on their bellies and look at stuff and see what they needed to do or pull strings. We don't pull a lot of string anymore. It's all kind of relied on, what the GPS tells you. And that's kind of what the folks out there, the ones that are building and the inspectors both, tend to rely on that. They just don't have the experience to lay down or to get down and look at a crossover and say, that just doesn't look right. Something doesn't look right here. Or, if we wedge this up here, we're going to trap water. They just can't see that. So we have to try to think a little bit more forward on those things now than we used to. And like I say, these changes that we get into end up costing time. And obviously time is money. It delays the completion of the project. The public gets kind of an expectation of, hey, we're going to have 5 or 6 lanes available to us in 2028. Now we've had to do a bunch of changes, and so it's going to be 2030, and they don't understand, so they don't understand what it takes to go into it. So, when the project gets delayed, then the contractor is going to come back and say, well, we need more money. Our costs are now much more than they were when we bid it. So, and then, those costs, they don't just affect that project, but they affect all projects, and they affect all future projects through our spend, through our forecasting of how much money we're going to need moving forward on some of the future projects. So it's all kind of like a snowball effect. So just saying all that to just think through some of those things. Get, in these constructability reviews, think about the water, think about the work zones, think about wedging and crossovers and pipe installations and where that water is going to get trapped in these projects. Because, like I say, especially in the West where I'm from, there's not a lot of room. There's not a lot of room to get the water off the roadway and out of the way. So that's what I had, and I'll turn it over to Randy to go from here.
I had to bring my notes. I'm not young and memorable like they are, I guess. My memory doesn't work quite as well. To give you a little background, Matt said I'm from ICE, and that may not be the ICE you're thinking about. Infrastructure Consulting and Engineering. I've been there 6 years. Just to give you background of myself, I spent about 10 years in design, and some of you here in the room are close to my age and may remember me, because I do remember some of you. Spent 10 years in roadside environmental in Raleigh. Then I went to construction, jumped to the dark side, I guess, as you designers think about it anyway. Spent 14 years basically as a resident engineer in Division 6. Finished my career as a division construction engineer, easy for me to say, in Division 6. And then I retired 6 years ago. So I'm back at being a resident for a while, working for DOT through ICE on a contract we have down there, working on a couple projects there in Division 6 on I-95. So if you drive down that way, I'm sorry. We're trying the best we can to get finished as quick as we can. So Troy had asked me to share some of my experience, and some of these are pictures I'm going to show you from recent events, but some of my experience goes back many years of what I'm going to talk about. Does this have a pointer, by the way? Does anybody know? Oh, yeah. All right. Let's see if we can advance. All right, so just to give you a, that's not my first slide, I don't think. Went too far, sorry about that. So a couple of my experiences, these are kind of the points I'm going to cover a little bit. Basically, y'all have a challenging job, I understand, because when we get plans, some of the worst things we see or problems that we see is inaccurate information. And it's not necessarily information that you provided, but it's information that was provided to you. So we may have situations where we find pipe systems that are not shown on the plans. We find unknown utilities that weren't shown on the plans. So it's hard to design around something you don't know that's there. So that's one problem that we see typically, especially as it relates to drainage. We start to put in a drainage system, we run into a gas line that's not supposed to be there. Then we have to back up and punt, especially when it's a bore and jack. A lot of times it can be disastrous, as you've probably seen. Also, there's conflicts a lot of times between existing drainage systems and proposed drainage systems. It looks nice on a set of plans when you put in a new line where the existing line was. The problem is sometimes that's not buildable. Sometimes you have to redirect short-term areas of drainage flow just to be able to get the new system in while you maintain the old system. Another point is also on widening projects, especially large widening projects. You go through a lot of phases, and we've talked about that already as far as traffic phases. And your drainage patterns change as you go. The traffic changes, and you got to make sure each phase accommodates for each of those. And the last point I've got on here is it's kind of the same, but it's a little bit different in that basically as you, especially this is, I guess, for traffic control folks, as you go through each phase, make sure each phase can control and has positive drainage. So you're not flooding the roadway from the traveling public, so you're not flooding property and so forth. So got a few examples. 3 particular items. So this is a typical situation that we ran into at some point in time. Basically, the premise here was to do temporary widening on the inside. This is a 4-lane to 8-lane widening. Sorry. Temporary widening on the inside, shift traffic inside, do the construction on the outside, finish the inside. Very simple. The problem is when you push traffic in and you are supposed to do the widening on the outside, that final surface elevation in this particular case, as you can see on the drawings, is 7 to 9 inches higher than where the traffic is. That becomes a problem, especially when no temporary drainage was accounted for. So in areas such in the west, it may not be as much of a problem because you have more grade. When you're down east, you have a lot of flat area. You have a lot of level grade. And so this water can accumulate and potentially flood the entire road in not so big storms. Just another example, a little bit different type of scenario. Excuse me. Basically, the blue here is does it show up as blue? Yep. Is the existing drain pipe. So the same premise, you're putting traffic on the inside, widening to the outside. In this particular situation, it's close to an interchange, so you have ramps coming down. So you have a bore and jack. Here's where I wanted my pointer. Bore and jack on the north side, bore and jack on the other side. But the problem is, you got traffic squeezed in. You only have about a 10-foot median section there that's separated by barrier. You have no way to finish that part right there. So unless you connect this up here and add temporary drainage on both ends, it's unbuildable. It's not constructible the way it's here. So it's things like that that we have to do in the field that many designers say, well, they'll just handle that in the field. Well, like Troy mentioned earlier, sometimes that's costly. Sometimes that creates a lot of delays. And here's the last one I'll talk about. So this was a phased construction of a certain interchange. And within that interchange, we had to do temporary ramps. And one of the notes you can see on the top, my voice is giving out. Top right, there's a note in the plans. Said to install temporary, or in order for the ramp area to drain, you had to install the drainage, the whole drainage system that I've clouded here in red. Does anybody see the problem with that? So down here's my bridge I'm building. Right here's where the existing traffic is, southbound, northbound. So the drainage has to go in phase 1. The bridges don't come out till phase 5. Drainage goes right under the existing bridges, right through the existing vents of the bridge. So not really buildable like it is. It's a large pipe, 54-inch, about 10 foot deep. So you don't really have room to even place that under the low existing bridges, even if you could eliminate one side or the other. So just things to think about. I threw 3 problems out there. They're going to talk about a little bit about solutions, not necessarily about this, but in some of the things they cover and some of the things I think that traffic control has asked of the designers. Hopefully some of these problems will go away. I would leave you with 2 notes, or 2 things to think about anyway. If something don't look right on the plans, it's probably not. Had another situation one time where had an interchange, had a box in each corner. They were all 4 connected with a pipe. That's not possible hydraulically, if you think about it. So if something don't look right, it's probably not. Get out and look at projects. Look at construction that's going on. I'm sure any resident in the state would be glad to have you come out, walk you through the project, see what you see if you see problems. Could be your project, could be somebody else's. I think there's things to learn on all of them. You want to take questions or pass it on?
Looks like you, right?
My name's Justin Beaver. Ken is not here today. He is helping route traffic for the hurricane out west. So he called me this morning and was like, hey, can you do this? So bear with me a little bit. We're going to talk about temporary drainage and work zones as it applies specifically kind of to the TMP designers and kind of move forward with some examples with that. Quick disclaimer, you're going to see some examples of plan sheets. It's not calling anybody out. That's just what we had readily available. A lot of these plans, they went through field inspection phase, and some of these issues have been resolved already. So first thing I want to touch on is chapter 1 of our TMP design manual talks about drainage specifically. And I kind of copied some language from that. You see highlighted here that all drainage issues need to be addressed by all units. And that's one of the things we struggle with a lot is the coordination between roadway, hydraulics, signals, all these groups. And it's up to the TMP designer to kind of catch those things and not necessarily find the solution, but pose the question. Unfortunately, this doesn't solve our issues. It's nice if we could just put this sign up every time, but I'm sure Troy wouldn't like that too much. But this is not considered a temporary drainage design. So another kind of excerpt from our design manual is common areas where you might find problems with temporary drainage that you might want to look at a little bit closer. Just listed some here: median crossovers, sag areas. Some of these are obvious, but sometimes they happen without you knowing them. With PCB, we use that a lot, especially in urban areas, and that can pose a big issue. Other areas that have to be spelled out in the phasing, open cut installation. I think Brian alluded to that earlier. Stage box culvert construction and pipe installation, especially wet utilities. That's another big thing we've had recently. So when thinking about drainage, location definitely matters. Just a few examples here. In the western region, you have a lot of steeper slopes. A lot of times, water gets off the site quickly, but it can cause channelized flow and not sheet flow across roadways, and that tends to cause more hydroplaning. In our central region, kind of between Charlotte and Raleigh, we have a lot of multi-lane highways. You have spread issues. You have a lot of super elevation issues when you start dealing with construction. And then out east, as Randy alluded to, you have a lot of ponding of water because there's no fall. So depending on where you're at, you might have to propose different solutions to TMP designs. And the big takeaway here is there are kind of two major considerations when you go into a TMP design regarding temporary drainage. First one is to maintain the existing drainage during construction. And that's identifying the existing structures, make sure that water still collects in those structures, make sure impacts to those structures during construction aren't affecting the existing drainage of the facility. And the phasing should consider when pipes and inlets are installed to prevent issues. The second big takeaway is if the existing drainage is not adequate during construction, is to install temporary drainage to satisfy. And there's a lot of issues where that's brought up. A few things I'll list here is stage construction, temporary alignments, barrier shifts. Spread is a big one, especially on bridges. Curb and gutter sections is also big, and you'll see an example of that later. So we're going to kind of step through a few examples here just to show you kind of what we've seen here recently. This is up in Raleigh, up on Atlantic Avenue, and there's a utility project, and this is kind of a before. You see two inlets there. You have an undivided roadway. There's a construction project coming here to install utility pipes down the middle of this road. And you can see on the far side, they're building the temporary alignment right now. So this is what it's like in 22. This is what it's like in 24. You can see PCB's gone right on top of that where that old curb used to be. And there's really nothing to alleviate that. You can even see inlet protection around where the red circle is, which, it stops the amount of flow that can go into those inlets. And this is what happens. You can see flooding in Raleigh. Here's another picture. We're just standing water. There's nowhere to go. And the capacity of those inlets is jeopardized because of construction. Another example here, you see there's two inlets approaching a bridge on the curb. And we're having to widen this bridge. So we're having to put PCB and fix the slope. Well, when we put PCB, it goes right on the curb line. A lot of times what this causes is the inlets to be jeopardized and water not to be able to flow in those inlets, and you have spread issues and ponding of water in the lanes. This is an existing facility where we have median drainage. There's a median grate inlet there. And we're coming in, and the plans call for that median to be ripped out. Now, we might be able to maintain that inlet, but it's something to consider, especially if you look at the super elevation at the bottom there. We're draining a lot of pavement to across that road. So something you can find out pre-planned is, hey, does this require temporary drainage? Like I said, it's not us, our concern to solve the issue right away. What we need to do is ask questions to the drainage designers of, does this need to be addressed? Another example here is an on-site detour of proposed construction. And you can see here you have a kind of opposite curves going here with opposite super elevations. And all that water is going to be trapped right there in the middle. You can see there the red circle, there's an existing pipe there. And that pipe's going to get buried by this construction. So the question becomes, is where's the water going to go? You just create a pond in the middle. This is the cross section of that view previously. You can see here where there's a good likelihood you're just going to trap water right there. This is an example we had a few years ago, and it's a byproduct of construction. It's kind of hard to catch in the TMP phase, but you can see in the median there. This is on I-40. We're building a new pavement there, and there's kind of a gravel drop off. What water does is it runs down that asphalt into the gravel, picks up sedimentation, tries to fit underneath the cracks of the PCP to go across the road, and starts clogging them up. And this is a long, long curve, sloped all the way down. You see where the sag is, the top of your screen there. What happens is all these pores get clogged up, and it starts creating a channel right behind the PCB until it gets strong enough to punch through. And then once it gets strong enough to punch through, you have a channelized part where people hydroplane across the road. So it's a maintenance concern as well as a design concern. And this is kind of what was alluded to earlier, where when you're going here and putting pavement down, with the lifts of pavement being higher than an existing roadway, you end up trapping water between the new lifts and the existing pavement. You can see there where the water is. It'll start building up right there until it becomes channelized again and cause hydroplaning issues. So here's an example where, like I said, being able to identify a need for temporary drainage. You can see here with at the bottom of your screen there that the on-site detour with the cross sections is going to cause a problem with the super elevation. And so there was a concern there identified where maybe we need some temporary drainage. And so a temporary gray inlet was proposed on the plans to be able to solve that issue. And another example is just identifying the need. Like I said, this is our job is to identify a concern and pass it along to other disciplines, not solve the entire issue. This is a plan that basically pointed to a sag and said there could be a temporary drainage here, and that information can get passed to Matt's group or the hydraulic designer and ask, can you investigate this? Some TMPs have significant drainage issues. I think this is down in kind of the Havelock bypass area where there's a lot of low-lying areas, and this plan shows full flow patterns on the TMP. Now, caveat, we're not expecting designers to do this for every job, but sometimes it calls for it. And sometimes it's nice to see where water is going, just to have a peace of mind that they've looked at it and identified where it could be an issue and where it couldn't. So I want to talk about temporary alignments real quick. That's one of the things that we've talked about recently. Typically, whenever we send a temporary alignment to roadway to design, they'll design the alignment, they'll send it to hydraulics, and hydraulics will look at, whether temporary drainage is needed. Where we run into problems is when we don't send it to roadway, we just do extend the super elevation. In this example here, you can see we're just extending super elevation to shift traffic slightly over. And so something like this wouldn't require temporary alignment. However, the problem is it doesn't get sent to hydraulics, and hydraulics never sees it, and you're encroaching on your median there, and now you've got a problem. So this is one of the key points of when you're doing TMP designs. If you encroach on medians and take away some of that drainage area, then you should ask the question to drainage, hey, you should look at this. A couple things that we tried to accomplish in our PDN process. This is our 2TM2 and 3TM1 with WorkZone specifically. We have language in there that does cover that, it should be looked at, temporary drainage. And, it's not always accomplished. Just highlighted some areas here. You can, if you can see those, you can read them. And another thing to cover too is the 2TM2 part of, of design. Those plans, I know we went from like a staging to a 50% to a 90% and to a final. Now we just have 2TM2 and 3TM1. We're really kind of expecting the 2TM2 to be almost what 50% used to be, not necessarily what staging was. And the idea there is that we want enough substance there to be able to review it at CFI and not, not have enough there to talk about. So some things we've talked about internally about moving forward. There's our man-day estimates, the kitchen sink that has all the things you can put time into. We talked about maybe splitting this out to coordinate as necessary with the other disciplines units and to be more specific, so you can you can get paid for all the coordination efforts that you may have to do with drainage and signals and those facets. The other thing we're looking at is revising our design manual, and that's that's a distant task, but it's something we're stepping through. And then finally, just our 2TM2 checklist and 3TM1 checklist. You can see the highlighted areas where temporary drainage and drainage pipes and new structures are listed there to check on. Just as a reminder that these do exist. And this is our 3TM1 checklist. And that's all I've got today.
Thank you, Justin. All right, do hydraulics here. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Laufer. I'm with the hydraulics unit. So we're just going to talk a little bit of the hydraulics considerations. You're going to hear some of the same themes, just working together to work through this process. So as we talk about this, why temporary drainage and construction phasing are important. And, construction talked about this, but, construction delays are significant to the department. If we can take care of it in design and minimize issues, out there in the field when they're constructing these projects, we need to take as much of that attention as we can. So we need to think about constructability, looking at, like Randy mentioned some things with that bridge and drainage. As you're out there thinking about your drainage design, how can they build this and what does that look like? Clarity of plans, making sure, like Randy said, if it doesn't look right, it probably isn't. And you might have to dig a little bit deeper on some of the data, maybe ask for another field survey, maybe actually go on the field and look at it, right? That's important. We tend to have more of a tendency to sit behind our desk, look at LiDAR, and make some design decisions. So sometimes getting out in the field and boots on the ground, looking at the drainage is extremely important. But then there's also damage to the project. If you don't think about your your drainage systems, you get a big event like we had out west, or you get an event, just some of these big thunderstorms and the water's not going in the right directions, or we haven't thought about where the major flows go, we can have some major damage to the project. And that's also coordinated with erosion control, but we need to be thinking about how the water's moving across the pavement once we exceed some of those design thresholds as well. And then we also have, if you have water out there and people hydroplane, or there's a backup of water, then there's delays due to accidents and things like that, and that has impacts on our economic issues as well. So safety, we want to think about that. Spreading the travel lane, looking at hydroplaning, and then just unexpected driving conditions. So are you changing the way the driver's expecting, or what he expects as they're going, he or she expects as they're going down the road? And then again, mentioning flooding. It can be really dangerous, definitely. I mean, we had an issue on Florence and I-85 where it turned into a canal of water. There's 2 feet of water in between the Jersey barriers, and they're just having challenges getting out. And so, as we design those PCBs and things, are there outlets and things to let that water come out? So it's a team effort with construction and design to move through that process. So as we talk about the hydraulic deliverables for traffic management plans and construction phasing, drainage design, we got DO2 alignments, median crossovers, phased bridge construction, widening projects, that type of thing. And then we've also got culvert replacements or extensions and how we phase that with the construction. And then that's also coordinated with the erosion control plans. But I really wanted to emphasize this. This is just, what is the communication of all the people that are involved? And as you're doing design, are you having some sort of connection with these folks? So, we got roadway, we got work zone traffic control there, but, we work with roadway, construction, there's hydraulics there. They should be communicating with these other disciplines. All these disciplines showed on here: roadside environmental, structures, geotech, utilities, construction. You can see how they all integrate. And as you're doing your design, you should be thinking about, can these other disciplines, will this work out with what I'm doing here, and how does that look? So I just put that little directory over there in the bottom left-hand corner, because it's really good to just, if you want to talk to somebody at DOT, just type their name in there and look it up, and they'll answer. So communication is extremely important as we go through this. So we made some PDN updates. We're going through those right now. And generally, they're just to encourage and coordinate and add additional specifics. So in 2HY1, delivering the preliminary hydraulic recommendations, no major changes there. However, as the hydraulics engineer, as you're working out there, as you're doing your preliminary design, just think about, how am I going to build this structure? What are the implications of maybe some of the preliminary, the stormwater control plans that I'm doing, things like that, as we build the RPS. So just something to think about. In 2HY2, in completing the drainage design, we've got pre-design meetings, so there's some things you can talk about there as design engineers. What are we looking at as far as drainage? Is it a widening project? So we know we're going to have additional coordination with works on traffic control. If it's with roadway and we got a roadway detour, then we know we're going to be working on that as well. And then we got our hydraulic survey reports, and then drainage plans and field inspections. So we did add construction phasing is required in conjunction with any culvert survey reports to demonstrate a temporary drainage plan that may be used to maintain flows adequately during culvert construction. So there's additional language in there for the construction phasing of culverts. And then additionally in 2HY2, attend preliminary TMP meeting. So this is what Justin was talking about with 2M2. And just make sure that we are coordinating really well with our work zone traffic control folks. So again, just emphasizing the importance of, can we build this well, and can we maintain traffic on it? So, and it's a two-way street, right? We should be going back and forth with these things. And then 2HY2 also we added, the hydraulic design engineer should be proactive in identifying drainage-related project concerns or opportunities for improvements as early as possible and communicating these to project team for consideration. So you're going to have to be reaching out to utilities, you're going to have to be reaching out to roadway, you're going to have to be to work zone traffic control, construction, how are we going to do this, and will it work? So, and then finally, just some of the other things with 3HY1 and 4HY1, we're just emphasizing coordination with the disciplines and deliverables for plan and hand set. I do want to mention on 5HY1, hydraulic construction support, I think the engineer of record that's doing the drainage, as much as we can, we should continue that consistency into construction. And so I know in a lot of projects I did in design, back 5-10 years ago, I'd make sure that as we work with our PEFs that we would continue that communication, that coordination into construction, make sure that, from a hydraulic standpoint, that they were available for any questions that come up during construction. We have a lot of phases during construction, but there's that in-between phase, and sometimes things need to be done. It really helps if that hydraulics engineer is on call and can get there and come out in the field and just help support those conversations. So I would recommend that practice. So if you're a design engineer on a project, as that project goes to construction, it'd be great, especially if it's more complex, like the risk on that. So like an interstate widening or something like that. So let's talk a little bit about characteristics of good temporary drainage and construction phasing plans. Again, coordination, thinking through the phases of construction. I brought this up. This is some of the phases of ICE on I-60/64. So you can just see all those phases. Each one of those phases is a design, right? A hydraulic design of how we're going to handle the water through those different phases. And then there's the in-between as the contractor's bringing that up. So how do you work that well as you go through? So there's a significant amount of effort and energy that goes into these, and we really should be looking at it, talking about it at field inspection, and making sure, again, we can build this. And I just want to bring this up because I think it emphasizes the importance and the detail that goes into these designs, that should go into these designs. And so, you just got your cross sections that are colored. You got a legend that's colored, and a lot of the detail and the PCBs, where we're going to place, blocking the PCBs, where do we got to keep them open. You've got the design on there of the final design, but then you also got the temporary design. But this type of thing, this level of detail is extremely important. You've got flows, capacities here. You can tell this project's been thought about, and the color phasing. And so especially, we're not going to do this on every project, but interstate widenings, if you're working on a project like that where we got to move traffic back and forth, just know that this will really save a lot of money if we go through this in design so construction can follow these processes. And then here's just another example of culvert phasing, so you can just see how it walk through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, a lot of description there. So your culvert phasing project should look like this as well, with the supporting documentation. So it's clear. If you can hand it over to somebody, they can read it, they can follow it, you've done a really good job. Pass it on to construction, let them look at it, and ask them if you've got a really complicated one. So let's just talk about spread and travel lanes. So the goal is to meet the guideline requirements in final design. Michael's going to talk about that a little bit, but when we're building our highways and roads, especially on interstate high speed facilities, no spread in the travel lane. I know we have it out there. We got it on I-95 and things, but the safety of public is a concern. So there are certain situations where we can't do that, right? It depends on the speed in the work zone, driver's expectations like I talked about, duration of that traffic pattern. How long is that going to be in that shift? Is it going to be 4 months? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be 12 months? So that goes into some of that decision making. Width of the lanes is also important. Is it a 12-foot lane, 10-foot lane, that type of thing? Project constraints. There just might not be enough room out there. So, and then project risk. What is the risk if we do have an accident out here, or water's draining onto the highway? So those are just some of the things we need to think about as we're going through that process. So tools for design. Hydroplaning assessment tool. I know on the I-95 project they were using the HAT tool. I don't think Matt York's in here, but if you guys want to know more about that, HAT 2.0 is now out. We'll be doing some training on that, but that's going to be good for planning, design, but it's also good for temporary drainage and looking at what kind of spread am I looking at, or what type of water film thickness am I looking at on the highway and road, and is it going to be a problem? So, and then there's the FHWA hydraulic toolbox. That's a pretty handy tool. And then also there's additional capabilities in drainage utilities and things on that end. So what's the road to success look like? I think just additionally apply the appropriate level of effort and thought to the project that we have at hand. So that's going to vary. Good coordination from beginning to end. So as you're a designer, reach out and think about utilities, think about coordinating with roadway and work zone traffic control throughout the process, and then construction. Can they build it? And then engage the correct level of resources, like I just mentioned, And then I think it's really important to provide that hydraulic construction support as we go into building these projects, as necessary and as the risk of the project requires. So I think with that, I will turn it over, but either Andy Jordan, who's our assistant state hydraulics engineer and designer, myself can answer additional questions if you have them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Mike Lindgren. My history is started in 1992, about 50 feet from where I stand right now, where I sit down at the Century Center. Worked for 10 years down at DOT, then spent 20 years out in private industry, and I've been back for a year and a half. So I'm excited to be back and looking forward to continuing to help improve our guidance, oversee the roadway design manual, and my part of this is to bring a roadway perspective to moving traffic in water and work zones, and specifically on temporary detours. And I need notes too. One of my focuses is on safety. Coming back to DOT, I've seen a lot of different trends, worked for a lot of design build projects, on a lot of design build, a lot of municipal, other projects. And I've really lately been focused on Vision Zero and the safety. What do I got? Oh, thanks. Thank you. And DOT has a lot of safety initiatives. This is one, there's a link up at the top there, if y'all get this. But they have a link that gets to a lot of the safety initiatives and programs. And it was really impactful to me to go through it all. There's a lot of safety information out there, especially with the gravity of what's happening out west and feeling for those people. I kind of feel the same way about the fatalities that happen on our highways. So that's always in the back of my mind when I'm starting to think about the guidance and how we can change it and make it better. One thing on here is that kind of struck me was about speeding and distracted driving, contributing to more than half of all work zone crashes. And I'm putting this speed limit sign on a lot of these slides because it is important to communicate between the roadway design engineer and work zone traffic control what the design speed is that we're providing for their work zone. If we tell them it's 55 miles an hour or 45, they assume it is, and they sign it accordingly and put it out there for the public to consume, and the public expects that they're going to be able to drive at those speeds. So, again, this kind of hit me, 50% speeding and distracted driving. As designers, we can't really do a lot about that, but everybody in this room can do their own part when they're out there. But one thing I'm focused on is let's avoid not meeting driver expectations as a contributor to any of these accidents that are happening. And this is the MUTCD, and it is got a wealth of knowledge for the work zone traffic engineers. And when they pull in a roadway design engineer, when they need an on-site detour, they need a plan, profile, cross sections, and roadways brought in to provide that design. The roadway design manual also has guidance, and it's been this way for a long time, but on interstates and freeways, the guidance is that it's desired to have the same as the posted speed limit. So our detour, we're going to try to provide the same as the posted speed on these high-speed facilities. It's not always possible, but it has to be communicated with the regional traffic engineer, work zone traffic control, and the division to make sure that everybody understands what that speed is. And for minor arterials, collectors, and local roads, we usually can drop the speed 10 miles an hour. A lot of words here, but I'll summarize a couple little things. It says the consequences, this is through the documentation and the research I did, the consequences of errors made at high rates of speed are generally severe. US DOT data shows that most fatal work zone crashes for all vehicles and large trucks occurred on roads with speed limits over 55. And in a survey of several states, 75% of the states responded to the survey and ranked improved guidance and on traffic barriers and design as a critical element of work zone traffic control. And we're no different. And so when we're designing detours, it is up to the engineer of record to communicate the design speed provided. And providing, this is one thing I've seen, providing the curvature for that posted speed without providing the super impacts really the effective design speed that we're providing. So with that, the reason I say that is through my experience with design build projects, I learned about a report, NCHRP 581, that we are currently evaluating at DOT with work zone traffic control and others that may allow some flexibility. It is guidance that is currently being utilized in other states, and it is using method 2 super elevation distribution for high-speed detours. And currently in the Green Book, that criteria, the method 2, is used for low-speed urban roadways. But other states have used it for high-speed detours. So, and just for reference, the method 5 super elevation distribution is what the Green Book has in their basic design tables that we all use, except for the low-speed urban. And the method 5 is much more comfortable, but method 2 is adequate. And so we are working on getting a buy-in to put that in our manual, and that continues. So I just say stay tuned. And that is the report, NCHRP 581. And like I said, we're looking at it, trying to decide how to incorporate that into our manual. But I will just, in closing, say we're all engineers, designers. If it's me, I'm looking at that possibility using this method 2 super elevation distribution as a minimum. I have something to stand behind rather than putting alignment out there without adequate super. And this method actually lets you tie at existing super rates a lot easier. And I know that's a desire to not have to wedge up and then remove. So that is roadway designs part of this. So I appreciate it.
All right, we got part of traffic is pedestrian, so Justin's going to come up and talk about that. Let's see here. Yeah, exactly. Where's my mouse?
Just since we all got you here and we have a little time to kill, let's talk about something we've been hammering for the past 3 or 4 years. That's pedestrians and work zones. So you may have seen this presentation a few times. We've given variations of it in the past, but we kind of want to hammer home the point that something we have to consider now in all our TMP plans, and even the new MUTCD precludes us from doing stuff we've done before. So you can see some bad examples here. Most of these are either type 3 barricades blocking a sidewalk, which is not ADA certified, or you can see you can ballast in the sidewalk as well. Just a quick coverage on this. We have 4 different levels of pedestrian accommodations. One's absence of need, that's if no existing facilities or no worn paths exist, or if it's less than 10 pets a day. We consider that absence of need, and you don't need to address pedestrians as part of the work zone. Nowadays, typically, community impacts, they'll do a determination beforehand to determine, what level of accommodation we may need to address. And, we can take that and address it later if we need to pull it down from, say, moderate to basic. But these are some pedestrian number thresholds. We do get pedestrian counts. If you have a project where you think it may be a concern, you can reach out to us and we can get a pedestrian count. Some other key points is, walk the project, determine existing conditions, especially the worn paths. Sometimes you can see this on Google Maps. But if there's a worn path and no sidewalk, then the worn path is a sidewalk. So we have to accommodate pedestrians. And this is just continuing the site visit. Continuity is a big thing. We have a lot of developers who they'll build a sheets and make them put sidewalk all over the place, and it doesn't connect anywhere. If it's a discontinuous network, that's not really a sidewalk anymore. We don't want to build sidewalk to areas that doesn't connect anything and trap people and they have nowhere to go. We all love this one, it's a good sidewalk there. I'm sure that's ADA compliant. But just talking more on the ADA compliance, with the sidewalk, 3-foot minimum, however, anything less than 5 has to have passing spaces. 5% slope, or I think it can also match the existing roadway. And then check the condition of the existing sidewalk to see if, it's free of roots and stuff. There's a lot of municipalities that will build sidewalk, and it's been there for 40 years near a mall, and just no one ever uses it anymore, and it gets overgrown, and the concrete's ripping up. But for T&B plans specifically, the big takeaway is, and if you're still using SS4 on our T&B plans, we just updated that cell for pedestrian barricades. It no longer looks like a type 3. It looks like this, the top screen, where it's more of a square. So hopefully that solves a lot of problems in the field. The big thing here is that 2-inch maximum clearance at the bottom. That's for wanderers who are, visually impaired. The other thing is don't have ballast sticking out into the sidewalk. Some of these pedestrian barricades that you might see, they have legs that stick out into the sidewalk, and if they're tall enough, that's a ADA violation. Audible warning devices. These, for the most part, you do need to include them. There's some exceptions. If you're near a signal that has audible devices, you have to include them. And disclaimer here, if there's population in the area with sight impairment, then it's required as well. So just consider that when you're doing the revision for the ADA devices. One of the biggest things we implemented is to try to prevent us putting temporary sidewalks everywhere. Sometimes there's situations where it's very, very difficult to accommodate pedestrians by providing sidewalk, and there's so little traffic, it's not feasible. What we have is a kind of a ride-sharing program. It's a pedestrian transport service, and what this requires the contractor to do is designate a pickup and drop-off location, and they can contract with any of the taxi services, Uber, whoever, but it's up to the contractor to do this. And they have to put a sign where the closure is and give a phone number to call. The rider gets picked up, dropped off to that designated location, and that gets all charged to the project. They don't have to pay a dime. Now, they can't pick up a ride and say, keep going to NC State if you're trying to get through Wade Avenue. But it's something we've done. We put this in a lot of projects these days. I don't know if we paid more than 50 trips of the probably thousands that we've had estimated. Pedestrians, they're going to see the sign and walk around it. What it does protect us, though, is we can close the sidewalk and provide access. So it is ADA compliant. So it satisfies all our obligations. But, pedestrians are going to do what they can do. So the other thing is like the interim sidewalks. If you're building a project, you're widening a undivided highway into a 4-lane divided or whatever, and you're putting sidewalk everywhere, try not to leave segments of sidewalk open that don't connect anywhere. What that ends up happening is you have pedestrians, they'll end up walking through work zones, or they'll cross roads at mid-block, and it creates a dangerous situation. The best thing to do is just leave those sidewalks closed until you can open it to a continuous network. Here's some good examples. You can see that barricade in the top to close the sidewalk. There's no extruding legs onto the sidewalk. It's a 2-inch maximum from the bottom there. And then you can see the pedestrian and bicycle detours. And on the right here, I believe this is Greenville, if I remember, where they had to basically redo the entire roadway, but they had to maintain access because it's more of an urban center. That's all we have for pedestrians. And turn back over to Matt.
Thanks, Justin. All right, so that concludes the presentation, so we can open it up for questions and go from there. Any questions for the group up here? Anybody? Yeah, Justin, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think as far as what you're used to roadway cross sections, of seeing cut sections every 25 feet across that's typically not, unless it's a temporary alignment. Usually the TMP designers, they'll cut a specific cross section or two that are important. If it's required to have multiple cross sections, then that's probably something we'd have to kick the roadway and start to figure out more of a collaborative effort. But our process isn't really to cut cross sections other than the specific points, so we don't really make the chains to run the cross sections across it. So, is that the answer? Well, I guess I'm agreeing with that. Is it something that you guys are?
I mean, we would typically work with roadway, and then and see what we need. But even on the I-6064 project, as a hydraulics designer, you only have these cross sections, right? So you got to kind of think about what's might happen between there and there, and so yeah, it can get more difficult. Now with the ORD in the model, right, Michael? We should have unlimited cross sections, but we're working on that, right? So we're working through that process. Any other questions out there? Back there.
Yeah, so the designer identifies that maintaining pedestrian access through temporary sidewalks is not feasible, and so they'll include that in the plans. In part of the LET plans, there'll be that provision in there for the accommodations, and we don't specify which one they have to use. They just have to have ADA accessibility to whoever they use. We've used it on a few projects in Raleigh. We've used it on a lot of projects these days, but the first few we've used were in Raleigh, and I think that picture you saw was from Lane Construction that was working on the project right out here. They I believe that was Wade Avenue where the picture was, but I think they contracted through Taxi, and basically they just called them directly, set up a number to them, and so whenever somebody calls that number, it gets billed to their account, and they just charge the DOT whatever trips that was, so they get paid for it. But it's up to the contractor to set up that service. But there's so many Uber services, taxi services across the state. When you get in the deep parts of the West, you probably struggle. But anywhere that has any type of urban activity, you're going to not have much of an issue.
I would say you need to be aware that there's service available. We have a project in Swansburg, and the taxi services were coming from Jacksonville or Morehead City, so they could not meet the 15-minute window. Luckily, the contractor was able to provide access through the work zone, but initially that was not the case, and it was causing a lot of issues.
Piggybacking on that, I know the provision is usually around each. Has there been a way to
usually we'll have a pedestrian count, and you can't really do a daily count and assume they're. We've thrown trips. We've thrown 50 trips at a job and they've used one. You know, we've thrown 500 trips at a job and they've used 0. So it's one of the things that almost never gets used. So I wouldn't go overboard because, you know, I think contractors can find a way to get paid for it. But yeah, it's one of those things where as long as it's in the contract, you know, and they end up using it more than you have, at least there's a number for it.
Any other questions out there? All right. Thank you for the listening audience, and thank you for participation today. Thanks, guys.
I'll take this away, and then I think we can just, they'll delete that stuff off of there, so I don't know you have to worry about it, so I'm going to take this with me. Kind of a fun little tool, huh? Hey, Randy, thanks, buddy. When you get PDHs from home, that's right, you get double, I think, or something. You get more than what I think you get more than what you first listened to.
Something like that.
Well, hello. How are you doing?